Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I have Dan Thomas here, another ex-TV newsie to grace my podcast. Dan, thanks for being here to talk about this topic. The first thing I want to do is just give you a chance to introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll get into what happened to you.
Yeah, thanks, Allison, for having me on, and thanks for everybody out there watching. You know, it's been a wild ride. Never thought that my 21-year TV career would end this way. I was a journalist and proud of it for a long time, and never thought that something like this would derail my career. For those of you that don't know, you can check out my story. I've got it up on my Facebook page if you can still find it. It's facebook.com/Dan Newsman12. Dan Newsman12 on Facebook. I'm told it's getting harder to find though, so kind of a weird world that we live in. And Allison, I know you deal with this kind of thing quite a bit. I never thought that, when I started this whole career 21 years ago, that it would be so hard just to say something that's true. But that's the situation we're in. Do you want me to go ahead and tell my story about the vaccine, or do you want to ask me a few questions?
Well, actually, I was going to play the video that a little bit of the video that you posted on Facebook so people could see that. But yeah, I guess we could just get right into that, and then we can back up in time after we discuss that whole issue. And I'd love to just hear more about why you got into the business and what you're thinking now, and has this changed your opinion on corporate TV news and all that good stuff. But let's play a little bit of this, and then we will chat.
For those of you who don't know me, my name's Dan Thomas, and I got fired for not taking the COVID-19 vaccine. I was the evening anchor at KXII. My family's been a part of the community here in Texoma, and we just want to say thank you to everyone out there who's shown all your love and support so far. It's so wonderful to be a part of this community. Now, I'm still a journalist. I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm just going to lay out some facts about what happened to me. You can decide for yourself about what you think about the pandemic or vaccine mandates or anything else. In short, I didn't take the COVID-19 vaccine because my doctor told me not to, because of my past medical history. And so when Gray Television, the company that owns KXII, came out with a mandate, I didn't worry about it. They said that they would give medical accommodations for people like me. So my doctor filled out the paperwork they provided. I turned it in, didn't think much about it, but I also didn't hear anything back. And the clock was ticking. So finally, after several days, I got a generic response back. Dear Gray employee, wasn't even addressed to me. They had turned down my request for an accommodation, but I thought surely a mistake had been made because my doctor says I shouldn't get it. And their denial had nothing to do with me. It wasn't even addressed to me. So I asked for clarification, and I found out on Wednesday that no mistake had been made, that they didn't care what the vaccine did to me or its side effects or my past medical history. None of that mattered. They just said it would be an undue hardship on the company to have me employed there. So they told me that on Wednesday, that I need to be fully vaccinated by Friday or I'd be fired. Now, it's important to note, it's not just my doctor. The CDC says people like me should not get the vaccine. A local pharmacy agreed that I should not get the vaccine. But I got fired.
Okay, I'll stop it there. So you got fired despite all of those things. I guess big picture, Dan, when you first found out that you were getting the can, how much time did you have to prepare for what was to come after that?
You know, they put out the vaccine mandate in mid-August or so. I started talking to corporate a few days after that, just email exchanges on what to do. My doctor filled out the paperwork. Everything was kind of bouncing along, seemingly fine. Nobody gave me any indication that they weren't going to give these accommodations that they promised. And so all the paperwork was in place. Everything seemed fine until about, I would say, I think it was a Saturday afternoon, so I may be getting the dates wrong, but it was about mid-September when I got that first denial email, convinced that it was a mistake, and asked for clarification. At that point, I started doing research because I thought something's gone wrong here. They're not operating with the full amount of information that's available. That's when I found out that the CDC agrees with my doctor that I should not get the shot. And so I thought, surely if they only knew that. Well, I turned that in, didn't hear anything back, and then boom, on Wednesday was told I was given less than 48 hours. I worked all day that day. Wednesday, did a full slate of newscasts. I did 4 newscasts a day, 5, 6, 9, and 10, and came back the next day, did 4 more newscasts. And to my knowledge, I didn't endanger any employees or anybody else around there. And the company was able to function quite well with me there. And not to brag, but we were #1 in the ratings. We're kind of a little island, if you will, in the world of TV news. Our ratings are phenomenal. Our viewers are extremely loyal, or at least they were before this happened. I keep saying I don't work there anymore. When I was there, we had tremendous success. And I know that sounds arrogant, but it's just the truth. And I don't think that I was a burden on the company. And to my knowledge, I wasn't infecting any employees. I've already had COVID. That's the other part of this. I've already had COVID. I survived it. It was rough. I don't recommend it. Do not get this if you can avoid it. And I'm not sitting here trying to advertise for people not to get the vaccine either. I think you ought to just talk to your doctor. You know, that used to be what we told people. In my case, you know, the answer was no, don't get it. And it seemed reasonable. And I didn't think I was a danger just because I'd already had it. And there's multiple studies, I'm sure you know much more than I do, about multiple studies with huge sample sizes showing that people who have never had COVID and get the vaccine are at higher risk than people like me who have had COVID already and are not vaccinated. So in any case, it's just a mind-numbing thing. But basically, it boils down, to answer your question, I was given less than 48 hours when the final hammer dropped. And they said, you're for sure are not going to get this accommodation. So my choice was basically, Allison, my choice was I either have to go in and lie to a medical professional and convince them to give me the shot and hope that I survive, and hope that I don't have a serious complication. And hopefully I'm able to keep my job in that case, or I told them the truth, they don't give me the vaccine and I get fired. So that was the choice that I was given, and I had less than 48 hours to make it.
And did you tell them about this part here? You were mentioning this is the CDC website talking about your specific allergy did you go into the specifics of it? I don't remember if you actually said that. You did.
I don't know if this is the exact page, but I believe if you scroll down, you can see if you're allergic to polyethylene, glycol, and polysorbate. Those are the 2. Okay. And that's just something that's kind of been a part of my life for almost 10 years now. It's not that big of a deal, really. It never comes up. I just don't take the flu vaccine. I avoid it in toothpaste. You know, I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, really.
Until now.
Until it cost me my entire career, livelihood. You know, and so I don't know. It's I mean, everybody can make up their own minds. You know, I'm not here trying to convince anybody one way or the other. I think everybody ought to do the right thing for their own health. And so there's no benefit to me getting the vaccine. There's an extreme risk, I guess, is if you draw up a cost benefit, ratio, I mean, it's pretty obvious why the advice there on the website is you should not get it. I think if your viewers can read what you have up there, they would see pretty clearly that if you have these 2 allergies, there is no available vaccine for you. And that you can start in, there's so many other debates out there to be had on this issue that, do I really even need it anyway because I already had it? Well, that's a secondary thing. The truth is I just can't get it. So,
and on top of that, the science around transmission right now and whether these mandates are really based in science anyway. So you tell your bosses this and they just say, sorry, but it's been nice. No, it almost sounds like you got the royal treatment my husband got from the U.S. military when he was done with his service.
Yeah. it was pretty cold and impersonal. Now, I did get a phone call from my general manager. Nobody locally, by the way, saw this coming or thought that it would come to this. I had complete support from my general manager. I don't know. I don't want to get anybody in trouble with corporate by naming names, but as far as I knew, the management in place was completely blindsided by this. This is something they did not want to happen and didn't think would happen. And I didn't think that I worked for a corporation that was like this, but the more that I learned about the pressure being put on not just Gray Television, but corporations all over this country are being really put in an impossible position, being pinned between their employees and the federal government. And the federal government has a lot of strings to pull, especially when it comes to television news and the regulations that television news faces. A growing company like Gray Television, heavily reliant on going to Washington quite a bit. And so I'm sure there's a lot of strings to be pulled. I'll just leave it at that. Everybody can certainly do their own research in that realm.
I haven't seen every single I got fired from TV news video, but a lot of the ones I've seen, the vast majority of the ones I've seen are Gray employees. And I know that there are many other ownership companies who have the same policy, but I don't know if they're being more gracious, I guess, with how they're dealing with exemptions and accommodation. So you got the exemption, but you didn't get the accommodation. Is that right?
Well, I'm
Or
not sure
no?
what the distinction is.
The distinction
No,
is
they agreed that I had a legit, yeah, in the final email to me, they said, your doctor has laid out a basis for an accommodation. However, in whatever HR language they had, said,
mhm.
we can't give it to you. And
Hmm.
so that was the bottom line.
What I've seen happen in a lot of cases is an employee, this especially in the government sector, gets an exemption. So your exemption's been approved, especially religious, because we're not going to go track down your, religious beliefs or argue with you on them. Though there have been cases of that, which I talked to one guy who they actually called his church to check up on him. But you'll get the exemption and then they'll say, but sorry, we just can't accommodate you. And that's how I think they're trying to get around potential lawsuits. So that's why I asked that. So when you're hearing from your other coworkers, or have you heard from your coworkers, what do they think about all this? And do you know other people who have been in the same position?
I do. Yeah, there were several of us who got fired. It's not just me. I have heard from my other coworkers. I don't want to make life uncomfortable for them because they're just trying to collect a paycheck, I'll tell you this. I have not heard from anybody who says, oh, Dan, you should have just gone ahead and gotten the shot. Not a single person has told me that at all. And I've yet to hear from anybody who says, well, that company's doing the right thing. Nobody's told me that. I'd love to hear from them. It just hasn't happened yet. Maybe there's people out there that really think that this is going to do some good in the world to fire people who can't get the shot. And what kind of world are we going to be living in here where if you're unable to get the shot, you just can't work? I mean, is that the world that we're going to live in? I guess so. I don't know where we're headed in this.
Okay. I guess I wanted to switch back to some more personal stuff before I start asking you all my big questions about what you think of TV news now. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like your family, why you got into the business? Because I'm also curious, like, where does this leave you guys? Are you the sole breadwinner for your family? How many kids? And what kind of position does this put you in now?
Yeah, I've got two kids, there they are, ages 10 and 2. And so yeah, it's my wife works at home, taking care of the kids. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she homeschools my daughter. My son's not yet in school. I don't know if we're going to homeschool him or not. It kind of all came about. My wife is a fantastic, strong woman. She had a great career. She was a professor at a university in Dallas, about 45 minutes south from here. And she was going along. Things were great. She got pregnant with our second child and decided that, I'm going to do this from now. I'm going to do this full time, be a mom full time. And things were great. The first 2 years, fortunately, I was blessed enough to make enough money that could be a possibility. And we had a fantastic life. Financially, everything was great. She was doing a fantastic job, still is doing a fantastic job. She's out taking them to activities right now, in fact. And so she works her fingers to the bone for this family, working from home. But yeah, I was the sole breadwinner when this happened. And it's not immediately clear what's going to happen from here, but I'm a firm believer that something wrong can't happen without something right happening. And it's just a matter of choosing which door to walk through next. And I don't know what that's going to be or where it's going to be. We love this community. We want to stay here. We made our lives here. We spent 7 years in this community. I grew up just a little bit north of here and always said that if I could ever get a job in this area, I would do it, just because there's so many wonderful things around here. You're 45 minutes from Dallas. You're 10 minutes to this huge Lake Texoma. It's a gigantic lake, 68,000 surface acres, fishing and outdoor activities, hiking, things like that. Just things that we love to do as a family. It's all right here for us. And, my daughter's involved in 7 different activities at this point. And it's just absolutely, in a way, it's been uplifting to see all the community rally around us. But yeah, we need to figure out a game plan for what comes next, how to pay the mortgage going forward.
Are you technically in Texas or Oklahoma?
I'm in Texas. The viewing area was in Oklahoma, so we're kind of wedged in between Dallas to our south, the DFW market, Oklahoma City, and Tulsa. So we're kind of in this little area right in between. We call it Texoma. There's a Lake Texoma here that straddles the state line. They dammed up the Red River back in the 1940s and created a gigantic man-made lake. It's got a dam that produces electricity right here on the Red River. And I live about 10 minutes from that lake. And it's fantastic. We love boating and water skiing and fishing and all of that. So
how does Governor Abbott's rule about businesses not mandating the vaccine affect you?
Well, it was nice to see him do it. It had no effect on the policy for Gray Television.
So what is just basically he just said that's the rule and it doesn't really apply?
Yeah, and the problem is it doesn't have any real teeth. So in the order that he put out, it said right away no jail time for any manager that enforces the federal mandate. That's fine. I don't want people to go to jail. Okay, I'm fine with that. The fine for enforcing the federal mandate, if the governor's order is even enforced, worst case scenario, a company like Gray Television faces a fine of $1,000 for enforcing the governor's order and going against Joe Biden's 100 employees or more mandate. We don't know yet, at least I don't know as of today, you may be more researched on this, what the OSHA fines are should this mandate be enforced by OSHA as is expected. And a lot of people, there's news stories out there that you can research. If it's enforced under a certain section of OSHA guidelines, the fine for OSHA per incident would be about $70,000 from the federal government per employee. So if an employee misses a test, the choice is you either get vaccinated or you get weekly tests. So if you don't have your paperwork when the OSHA inspector shows up for week 23, 6 months from now, then you're looking at a hefty fine from the federal government. It could go even higher, as high as $700,000 an incident. If the reconciliation bill is passed in Congress, there's a provision in there to increase that OSHA fine to $700,000 per incident. So these companies are looking at $1,000 from Texas. I'll go ahead and pay that just to avoid the OSHA fine. So these companies are kind of weighing as it always does, comes down to the dollars. And unfortunately, Governor Abbott's order could have an effect on a company that was predisposed to stand up. But other companies that have to function in all 50 states around the nation, I don't think are going to be doing that.
somebody on my locals platform, and just give them a shout out over there, AllisonMorrow.locals.com. Join my editorial board. We do meetings either before or after my Saturday morning live streams. You can help me pick out stories for the week ahead and give me feedback on the week prior. Head over there and join up. And you know what? Hey, maybe it's time for you to get on locals, Dan. Maybe that's an option for you. You can start another I Quit TV News page like me. So somebody asked if they discussed accommodations at all with you, or they just blew past that. Did they say anything like the reason why they weren't giving you an accommodation?
Just that it would be a hardship on the company, and then they had some other HR speak type things in there that I don't really understand. I'm sure it's all lawyered and all of that. But yeah, it was essentially that I have two emails, basically. I've got the one that wasn't addressed to me, and then I've got the final one. They actually did use my name and said that I had to get the vaccine, basically. But yeah, they listed out that, masking is not perfect. Weekly testing would be an undue hardship, and things like that. So
weekly testing would be an undue hardship on them.
I'm sorry, what?
I was saying weekly testing would be an undue hardship on them, is what they were saying.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. I'd love to know the answer.
So you really couldn't get a hold of anybody who could explain all of this to you?
Yeah, I couldn't. Like I said, it came down to two emails from HR. I asked for a phone call as well in one of my emails, and never got a phone call. I did get a phone call from my general manager informing me that I was fired and explaining what would happen next, as far as possessions in my desk and things like that, and my passcode to get in the door and that kind of stuff. But that was the only phone conversation I had, or even any kind of verbal conversation at that point. I would have loved to have talked to them and learned more about what they're thinking. I'd love to have the answers. I'm sure your viewers have all sorts of questions out there, as do I. I'd love to get some of those questions answered. Unfortunately, I think the only way I'm going to get those answered is by going through court. And so that's something that we're looking into right now. Lawyers don't work cheap, I found out.
No.
Yeah.
And they've got plenty of business right now. Okay, well, let's talk about that in a second. And then I also wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the industry now that you've kind of gone through this. But first, if you are listening to Dan's story and you're like, man, I need a drink, which I can totally understand. Or Dan, maybe you need a drink too. You should go to AllisonWinePromo.com, AllisonWinePromo.com. You will get 50% off some of my favorite Argentinian Malbecs and 50% off shipping. We got a lot of high altitude ones here, one from 8,600 feet, one from 8,000 feet, and very remote wine. So they have a very robust, if you like dry but robust tasting wines. This is definitely not for the Chardonnay drinker. Sorry, no offense, but this is for the steak night, I guess, or maybe just the tofu that tastes like steak night. But if you are just waking up somewhere and you just can't believe what Dan is saying, and you're thinking, is this really happening? I need a cup of coffee to try to plan for the end of the world. I have that too. You can go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. These are high altitude shade grown Nicaraguan roasts, USDA certified organic. And one of the cool things about Twin Engine Coffee is that they are located very close to the beaches of Nicaragua. And right now they are helping save sea turtle nests from poachers, and you can get involved with their work and actually adopt a nest, and they'll show you video of the sea turtles hatching out of their nest. So kind of a cool thing. I used to be an environmental reporter, and actually one of my first science projects was about sea turtle eggs, because I grew up on the beaches of Florida. And I don't know if you knew this, Dan, but temperature, if I remember correctly, temperature changes the sex of a sea turtle in the egg. So depending on how hot or how cold it is, though I can't remember exactly which is which, you get a boy or a girl. And what was even doubly fascinating for me when I learned about all that is that fast forward, I'm in graduate school studying theology and psychology, and it turns out hundreds of years ago, they used to think that you'd have a boy or a girl if you made the woman hot or cold. And of course, back then everybody wanted a boy, so I think it was hot, so they would just cover tons of blankets thinking they were going to get a boy. And they were obviously wrong, but actually it turns out with sea turtles, if they had been hatching those, then they would have been right. So anyway, okay, thanks for supporting my sponsors, everybody. Dan, let's talk about corporate news. So I'm guessing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that up until this point, I don't know, maybe you had a pretty good relationship with the business, and not that you don't have a good relationship with it now. I guess you have sort of no relationship. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I, towards the end of my career, was, if I had gotten canned, I remember I used to say this to my friends. They'd be like, because I was kind of a rebel. I was a little bit of a rebel in the newsroom. And they would like, are you going to, you think you're going to get fired? And I used to be like, I could only hope that I would get fired, because I'm just so over this industry. And I ended up quitting anyway on my own terms, really. But I had so many issues with it by the time I was done. Not even because things had necessarily gotten significantly worse, though I think in some ways they had, just from the standpoint structurally of people being able to really do their jobs, reporters knowing what they're talking about. I used to shoot and edit all of my own stuff. I had to travel long distances sometimes. And I covered a beat where I was doing the same stuff every day, but lots of reporters are doing general assignment. They have to learn something new every day, and they just don't have a whole lot of time. It made me really question the accuracy of what we were putting out there, and selling it to viewers as if we were like the experts. A lot of recycling bureaucratic talking points, Department of Health stuff. That's why I started talking about media on my channel back when I was doing Airstream renovation at first. It was very non-controversial, but when COVID hit, I got really concerned that this level of, I guess, trust that people have in our industry was leading them down some potentially dangerous paths, not just with health, but civil liberties. There's a lot of lockdown of like early treatment conversation, people that were maligned, even though they're experts in their field, not allowed to talk on mainstream news. And it made me more and more concerned, not necessarily to fact check them all the time, but just to say to people, hey, listen, let me tell you a little bit about what it's like behind the scenes. And then you can decide what level of trust you want to have in that information. Maybe you just take it with a grain of salt. I always say I would like it if the newscast would start with, welcome to the 5 o'clock news. This is the best we could do. And just be honest with people about what's going on behind the scenes. So I want to hear a little bit about what you were thinking before all this happened.
I've been a small market. I've bounced all around. I was actually in Florida. I worked in Pensacola for about 8 years and ended up doing some investigative reporting toward the end when I was there. Went to Oklahoma City as an anchor, started anchoring more at that point, and fell into this role where I was anchoring full-time, 4 shows a day, just preparing for that. And I also had the extra role of being a managing editor, which was essentially just trying to make sure we don't get sued, was kind of the daily mantra. Because we're working with a lot of very excited, young, enthusiastic reporters that are still learning how to do this job. It's hard to teach in college. This isn't something that you do go to school for it, but then your first job out, you kind of have to unlearn everything and learn how it's really done. And so a lot of what I was doing is trying to teach reporters how to get rid of that bureaucratic talk, ask the right questions, telling them, hey, why didn't we ask this? Let's push for a better story. Let's try to make it something our viewers can understand. All the bread and butter things that you learn, being concise, speaking in a language that everybody can understand quickly, trying to tell complicated concepts in the fastest, easiest way to capture the viewer's attention so that you're actually telling a story out there, all the other storytelling things that come with this business. And I got to tell you, I was still excited about doing it on the day that I left. My very last day in the newsroom was a good one. We had great stories. I felt like our reporters did a fantastic job. They were excited about their job. I've seen ups and downs in every newsroom that I've worked in as far as the attitude of everybody. I felt like when I left, I felt like everybody had a pretty good attitude about the vision of what this job can be. But it can certainly it can turn into something where you're just chasing press releases. The police officer or the mayor tells you something, or the superintendent says something about a school bond. You have no idea what it means, but you write it down in your story and it goes out on air. And somebody asks you, well, what's that mean? And you have no idea. There's a lot of that in this business where they're just repeating things that, well, that's what they told me. Well, what does it mean? Oh, I don't know. There's a lot of that stuff going on in the business, unfortunately. And I felt like I was in a good position to help do, at least in a small way, help guide young reporters into knowing what they should be doing versus what they can get away with. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of newsrooms out there that, they're just trying to fill time. They're scrambling. Everybody's short-staffed like crazy. People are having to shoot their own video, edit their own stuff, find their own stories. We don't have enough assignment editors to help with any of that. The role of video editor is virtually gone in every newsroom out there now. And, the producers are, you get one producer a show. When I started this business, there would be a producer and a couple of associate producers for every show. That's a thing of the past now. So, it's everybody, every year it seems like they figure out a way to do the same job with less people. And unfortunately, that makes less time for the journalist part of it to come out, for the journalist to actually make that extra phone call, read that entire bill for yourself. Don't just rely on what the state representative says is in the bill or what the press release is from the state representative. Actually read the bill yourself. A lot of times they just don't have time to do that because we're stretched so thin on so many fronts, because in so many ways corporate wants to stretch the dollar as far as it can possibly go.
Yeah, this is funny. Short staff, the hell you say? Maybe they shouldn't be dumping everyone to hit that profit margin. Yeah, I'm sure what's happening now is not necessarily going to help. I guess we'll see what happens. When it all really changed for me, I kind of got into the business, I guess, just before the recession hit in 2008. And I remember my first job in Macon, Georgia. And they're like, once you get past Macon, Georgia, then you'll go big time and you can work with a photographer and you won't be shooting and editing all your own stuff. And then I got to Knoxville and they're like, the housing market just crashed. So we're going to do this thing called multimedia journalism and we're going to split the staff. So the photographers are going to do some writing and the reporters are now going to do some shooting. And I was like, wait, I just did that. I thought I was going to not do that anymore. And they're like, nope, that's the way it is. And then I go to Florida. Now I'm in the top 15 market and it's like, I'm still doing that. And sometimes I'm doing it at night by myself in some really unsafe places. And then I get to Seattle, which is like a filter market to the networks, and I'm still doing it. Now, on one hand, I was grateful that they still had an environmental beat at my station in Seattle, because that was something that I think I was the only or one of two for a full-time environmental position for a TV station in the entire country. And the only reason I was allowed to keep that really was because I didn't take a photographer with me. I could just go do it all on my own. That said, like you were bringing up, when you're talking about reading things like the Clean Water Act and understanding Senate bills related to it, that was another one of my breaking points. People always ask me, like, what was it? And I have a couple different things that were sort of like big aha moments, but that was another one where I came back and I was doing something on changes to the Clean Water Act. And it's often framed like Clean Water Act, good, pollution bad, as if these are two completely mutually exclusive things, as if there's nothing wrong potentially bureaucratically with the Clean Water Act that makes it worse for the environment. These things can't happen in politics if the public's not paying close attention to it. And I didn't really know what I was talking about. And I turned to one of my coworkers who'd been in the business 4 decades and said, I'm frustrated because I cannot read the Senate bill. I need to read the Senate bill to know what I'm talking about. And her response was, just say what NBC says, because they're usually right. And I was like, but I'm the only environmental reporter in the country. How is it possible that somebody in New York City wrote something for the website and knows more than I do about this? I just don't believe that. So that was an unacceptable answer for me. And it was a very defeatist day. That's why I said, like, if my bosses would have let me just go on TV and say, Well, guys, thank you. Today we're talking about the Clean Water Act. Honestly, didn't have time to read the bill, so take this with a grain of salt. Roll that tape. Then I would have probably stayed longer. It was just that I felt like, I was over promising and under delivering on a regular basis. And again, maybe that's not every single day for every single person, because if you're somebody who's like, there was a car accident down the street, okay, that's probably not the same thing as the Clean Water Act. Maybe you don't need as much time, but the further you get away geographically from what you're talking about, so now, like, as local news stations are covering COVID policy that's coming out of the federal government, all that stuff, and just taking their affiliates copy and repeating it in the prompter, and people always ask, well, are they vetting that? I mean, does the producer in Texoma call Jen Psaki and say, hang on a second, I have a few questions about this? No, they don't do that. They just put it in the prompter. So all that stuff just gets repeated, the AP stuff, the Reuters stuff, and that's how misinformation gets passed down without not that I don't believe that there are special interests at the top that are very intentional, but I think the vast majority of people working think they're going to work trying to do the best that they can, and there are systemic issues that are really keeping even the most well-meaning journalists from really being able to do a good job nowadays. That's just my read on it all.
No, I think you're completely right, and I hear people, they have all these conspiracy theories about how news works, and every incident that I've ever seen of us putting something out that is out of context or not quite right, or that's not what the bill says. I know that's what this special interest group says, but if you read the bill, that's not what it says. But, somehow that talking point slips its way into the newscast. Every incident I've ever seen is the pressure to fill time with a short staff, and you're not checking those stories. You're just grabbing it off the feed. It's 30 minutes to air. I've got, as a producer, 30 different things I've got to do in the next 30 minutes. I'm plugging this hole and moving on to the next thing. I've got teases I've got to write. I've got headlines. I've got to go talk to the weather department about what's happening. 10 different things, that you've got to get done. And if you can just check that box by just plugging in whatever the network's putting out that day, that's how it makes air, usually in a local market. From what I've seen, it's never a sinister, we're really going to change the vote on this thing or what people think. It just somehow slips in. And I think a lot of times on the network level, I can't speak for that. I never worked for the network. A lot of times I just see sloppy scripts coming down, grammatical errors, run-on sentences, just things where you can tell they didn't even put in the time on this story to do it right. And so I think on all levels of our industry, there's just so much pressure to get more content with fewer people. That means less time to actually do your research and put together something that is factual and in the proper context so that people can understand why this is. So that's what
and if you are going to be in a position where you need to push back on some kind of narrative or groupthink in your newsroom, you got to really know what you're talking about. And if you don't have the time, you don't know what you're talking about. So you're going to have fewer people who are sitting there thinking, wait a second, just something's off here, and feel empowered to do that. It sounds like maybe you didn't have a lot of experiences like that. I would say the vast majority of my experiences are a lot of what you described. However, I did have experiences where it was very clear that we had a particular, at our station, we had a particular viewpoint from management on that. And that was non-questionable. It was like you were anti-science or psychotic, I guess, if you were allowing that voice to be on air. And I noticed that more and more now. That it could have been where I was regionally. It could have been because we were covering at a larger market. You tend to be covering more national news or news of national interest, I think. And Seattle also was a market that people liked, sort of more intellectual news versus just like, this is the fire that happened down the street. So we were constantly chasing that kind of stuff. But I did notice a real significant change under the Trump presidency, and then kind of after, well, I guess I was out of the news business before he was out, but I paid attention to it closely from the independent side of things. And I did notice sort of, I guess you would call it just maybe more like showing on your sleeve that you feel like as a newsroom, you have this gatekeeper responsibility, and you're now the one choosing the voices that are dangerous for the public and vetting that and then not allowing them. I definitely saw that happen a few times in my career. So are you saying you never really saw anything that intentional?
Well, with the vaccine, I certainly did, and with really the entire pandemic. You know, pick any issue in this pandemic, everybody knows all about them, but it just seemed like there was a lack of curiosity, a complete adherence to just whatever the federal government was putting out. And if somebody somewhere had an experience that conflicted with that, we could, you know, in my experience, you're right. We didn't do a lot of investigation, and just because of the staffing issue. And so anytime we thought like, well, you know, we should really look into this or we should look into that, whatever the issue of the day is, you know, I felt like it never really got a fair shake just because there's nothing on the feeds that we could pull from. There was nothing anywhere else, any other source other than we're just going to have to chip away at this on our own. And we just didn't have the staff to do that. And certainly when the vaccines came out, I could see that firsthand, just because I'm being told one thing from my doctor and I'm being forced to do an entirely different thing by the prevailing conventional wisdom. And Allison, I'll tell you, I didn't even know, you pulled up that CDC webpage earlier. I didn't even know that existed until after that first rejection email. And I started doing my own research and talking to people and figuring out, well, what's the deal? I mean, can I violate, you know, can I go against my doctor's orders of what exactly is going to happen here? And I find out that, you know, there's plenty of research out there saying that you should not get the shot under these circumstances. And that goes against, I mean, if you look at it this way, look at all the PSAs that are on television right now telling people, I mean, this is football's going on right now. Guaranteed that if you watch a college football game today, you're going to see a PSA out there, maybe even from an authority at a university, telling everyone to go get the shot. Everyone has to get the shot. And you should be vaccinated, talking right into the screen. Mm-hmm. But that's not even sound medical guidance. I mean, that's you know, you don't even have to look that far to find out that no, not everyone should get the shot. And the message should probably, I think a more responsible message would be, talk to your doctor, find out if the shot's right for you, do some research. I mean, to me, that would seem like a reasonable thing to tell people, but that's not the prevailing message out there. And I think if you look at, I don't know how much you've looked into the American Rescue Plan or Recovery Plan, ARP. It was passed in April. Look at the billions of dollars that they've spent on an awareness campaign out there, the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've spent buying airtime. And it's all one message, get vaccinated. And there's no room for any logical thought or find out if it's right for you. That's not the message at all. It's just get the shot no matter what it does to you.
Yeah. I had a conversation not too long ago with a couple of former coworkers who were really, really emotionally attached to that. And I didn't say this, but I wanted to be like, should you be covering this topic? I mean, if you're, you know, I had never heard journalists preface what they're about to say when it comes to covering an issue with, well, this is how I'm staunchly feeling about this, just before I even listen to your talking points or consider what you have to say. I want you to know where I stand. And I'm like, what other topic do we do that on? I just never heard that before this, where you're like, well, this is how I feel about it. Like, well, who cares? You know, because like, I don't have any, I remember somebody said, I don't have any sympathy for people who choose not to get the shot. Okay. Are you the best person to be covering this topic? I mean, I just like if you aren't able to not just put yourself in somebody else's shoes, which is what journalists you try to see the world through their eyes and figure out how they think and what's going on and what's the truth and all of that. But also just the like you said, the scientific accuracy of your standpoint. You're not allowing yourself to be questioned by like actual facts, not even just empathy for somebody's story, but like actual scientific facts. So to go back to your particular case where you end up getting terminated with medical reasons to not take the vaccine, do you question then? I mean, I guess you've already talked about it a little bit, but do you look back and say, man, if these companies are doing this to their employees, they're taking a stand on this in a way does that make them incapable of really giving a fair shake to this issue of mandates, of employee mandates? Or you're like, hey, listen, maybe they wouldn't do it, but it's the federal government. They're just trying to comply with the federal government. Because I have real concerns about their covering this topic as objectively as possible when they're making it very clear their stance on this is not really based in science, at least when it comes to the transmission, or in your particular case, allowing accommodations for people who have legitimate reasons to not get it. And then my other concern is that as more people like yourself are terminated, who would potentially be offering counterpoints to those narratives, there are just fewer people left in the newsrooms who are really going to push back.
Oh yeah, that's one of the biggest fears that I have for journalism in general. I mean, if you think about it, any company over 100 people has to be on board with this vaccine mandate, right? So, and even if they weren't, a lot of companies were putting out vaccine mandates even before that mandate came down. So if you think about it, no one on television, essentially, if you look at, there's a few stations out there that have less than 100 employees company-wide, so they're out there. But the overwhelming majority of the business, if you look at media consolidation, the top three ownership groups, Sinclair, Gray, and Nexstar, own an overwhelming majority of television stations in this country, markets. They're in an overwhelming number of markets. So if those companies all have over 100 employees. So what I'm getting at is no one on your television screen is going to be unvaccinated. They're all going to be sort of invested in one side of this issue in some respect. So it's going to take someone with a lot of courage to swim upstream and actually ask some questions about how this mandate's been rolled out and how the vaccine's going forward. But yeah, it's a horrible position. Like if they mandated that everybody has to vote a certain way to work at this company, nobody would accept that, and no one would believe that they're getting non-biased news stories out there too. So you have company after company, the television ownership group after television ownership group, and even print journalism ownership groups that are heavily invested on one side of this equation. And so, yeah, it's going to be I think a very dangerous thing for journalism going forward, as far as finding that objective voice that can say, well, maybe we should listen to this person, or maybe we should look at this study. And I think that's another thing that's been really surprising. The more and more research that I've done since this, there is such a wealth of information out there that we could be doing things better to help more people, to get rid of this pandemic faster, if we just look at these legitimate studies that are out there. That I'm sure you know much more about them than I do, but it just seems like those studies aren't getting looked at. The only thing we're looking at is press releases from some sort of government agency or a politician.
Right. Yeah, I think from the doctors that I've talked to, one of the gravest consequences of that is the lack of knowledge that people have about options for early treatment. And this is a point in time where patients really need to be advocating for themselves. And if they don't know that there are options and they just get sent home until they need oxygen, you look at all these people who have died. And I think it's a valid question to say how many of their lives, potentially hundreds of thousands of them, could have been saved if they had been aware of options that are out there, but are not discussed to their detriment, really, because the vaccine just gets pushed as if it's the only thing that you can do. And I think that also is just a real failure of journalism as well. Now, to your point about who's going to be swimming upstream in newsrooms, I don't know. A lot of the people, I think, now that they're leaving and going public, I wonder if the pushback's going to be coming from those of us who are the ones who have left and are now talking about it from the outside. I don't know. Maybe we'll give them something to think about. But I guess that's one of my last questions for you is you put your video out publicly. There have been a lot of TV reporters who have talked about this. We've seen Allison Williams at ESPN. We saw Kim St. Onge. I think she's in St. Louis, Missouri. There have been a couple people that, like I said, again, actually quite a few from Gray. There was a weather guy, I think, that was with Gray that I just saw. So that to me was unique. Not that there are people leaving TV news, but that I haven't seen on this level people saying why they left and pushing back on the reasons that their companies are giving them. I don't know if that's career suicide or not in the business. I don't know. And I'm curious how you went through the process of thinking, I'm going to go public with this. I'm going to talk about it and the potential consequences of that. So I guess that's my first question. When you're thinking like, I'm going to tell people what happened here, take me through that process. And then additionally, as others have done that, do you think that these folks are thinking to themselves, whatever, it's just one of those times I have to speak out, or I hope I get picked up by somebody else? And is that unique to you to see these journalists telling their stories publicly on such a controversial topic?
Oh, I think it's definitely unique. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in my lifetime. And I certainly never thought I would be speaking publicly about anything. And I'm not even sure why this is a politicized issue to begin with. That's an even larger question about how we got to this point. But yeah, no, I never, ever, if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, even after that first denial letter, Dan, are you going to speak out on this? I would have said, absolutely not. No, I don't do that. I really believe, and I still believe, in just the basic ideals of what journalism is. And I think that you have a duty. You should have your own thoughts, of course. I don't think that I'm encouraging any journalists out there just to not think about anything politically or anything else. But you should not speak out publicly, right, on most issues. If you're a journalist, you want to maintain your objectivity and not expose your bias and all that stuff. And so, everybody has bias on every issue. Journalists live in the same world as everybody else. So I'm not sitting here pretending like I never had any kind of thought about anything until this happened. But I certainly never thought about going public. And what happened in my case was a very influential industry blog picked up my story. I believe it was on the Sunday, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure on the timing. Anyway, the story got out without me doing it. The Tuesday after I got fired, I decided, well, people are talking about it. People are certainly talking about it locally. We had protesters at the station.
Really?
Yeah. And and so I figured, well, let's just get the truth out. Number one, the number one purpose, honestly, that I had in coming out was that I wanted people to understand that it was not a local decision. Okay, so the worst thing that I can think of is one of these protesters gets really angry at somebody walking to their car that night, and God forbid something bad happens, some sort of confrontation. I don't think that would have happened. I think everybody that went out to protest, their heart was in the right place and nobody got hurt. Nothing like that ever happened. But I think as long as people know the truth about what happened, how it happened, that it wasn't anybody locally, the person who's a producer that you go to church with didn't make this decision to fire Dan. The salesperson that comes to your car dealership didn't make this decision. I think as long as people knew that, then maybe it could at least change the environment that my coworkers had to live in. So that was the number one goal. And then I think the number two goal is I'm just a firm believer in the truth. If just what's true gets out there, then things will fall into place. And that's part of the reason why I believe in journalism, that when if you just tell people what's happening, usually they can make a pretty good decision. So, you know, people can decide on their own what they think about my case. But I wanted just to absolutely have the truth of what happened get out there. So that's why I did it. That's why I came forward. I don't know if there's any other issue that I would have come forward on. I've never done anything like that in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I felt we live in such a weird time, you know,
Yeah.
everybody's doing things they never thought they would.
That's the truth. Yeah. So I just pulled up the Newsweek article because they featured you as well. All right. I want you to tell people what's next for you on your journey and how they can find you. I'm going to throw up your Twitter here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Dan Newsman. Yeah, there it is. I guess I'll need to change the cover photo there now that I'm looking at it. And then I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/Dan Newsman12. I'm on Instagram as well under that same thing. I do have a fundraiser, going to plan on using it for legal expenses if we can get the ball rolling on that court. If you want to go to givesendgo.com/support Dan, that's givesendgo.com/support Dan. And there's a link to it on my Facebook page as well. And, you know, if people are constantly asking me, how can I help? If that's how you're motivated, if you're motivated in that realm, you want to get involved. And the thing that I figure is this is only going to get fixed in court, really. I don't see any politicians out there standing up, fighting against this. We had the governor's order. We talked about that. Montana does have a law in the books. That might be an interesting topic for your show to look at what Montana did, because they're still hiring out there. Florida has a special session coming to address this very issue of accommodations for employees and vaccine mandates. So there's a few here and there things that politicians are doing to address the issue, but those things aren't going to come in time to save the jobs that are going to be lost here. You know, we've got a huge round of people. You can just Google it. Any number of industries looking at firing hundreds and thousands of people at individual workplaces. So I don't think anything's going to get done in time. If we can get a few wins in court, then maybe we can get it stopped. If we can develop some sort of case law, this is uncharted territory. So that's I'm not a lawyer, but the lawyers tell me that's what it's going to take. So that's why I've got the fundraiser going right now. So that's where I'm headed next. If there's a television ownership group out there that wants to check into me, you can give me a shout out too. I'd love to talk to anybody. I love the job I did. I still believed in journalism. I was in a position to kind of mentor young journalists and hopefully get them on the right path. And so that's what I love doing. And so that's where I'm at, Allison. I mean, there's fortunately it's a big wide world out there. I don't know if my future will include staying in journalism. I hope it does. But you know, there's a lot of other things out there too. I grew up working on washers and dryers, so you know, maybe I can go back to that. If anybody needs a washer and dryer repaired, they can give me a call too.
Yeah. Well, it puts a whole new definition on spin for your work, right? So
spin cycle, right? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you for giving me a chance to add
just
one
don't get
pun
too
to,
agitated.
What'd you say?
Just don't get too agitated.
Yeah,
Agitated.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so many puns you could go down that road. Permanent press, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. Well, Dan, I really appreciate it. I feel for you, man. I'm grateful you were willing to do this, and thanks everybody for watching, and go check out Dan's say it one more time, the go fund.
givesendgo.com/support Dan. That's givesendgo.com/support Dan. It's a GoFundMe kind of thing, but it's not on GoFundMe. So givesendgo.com/support Dan.
Okay.
And there's a link to it on my Facebook too. Give me a follow on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's speak out. Let's get the truth out there and let people know that, hey, if you got fired because you didn't take the vaccine, it doesn't mean you're some sort of crazy lunatic. You know, there's a lot that people just don't know out there. I know there's a lot of stigma around people that are in my situation. So I just want to get the truth out. And let people know that maybe there's something more to this issue that you might not be told. So I appreciate what you're doing, Allison. What a fantastic job you've got here. And yeah, I'll have to check into this locals thing too.
Yeah, get on locals, and I hope you'll come back for future topics, just to give your perspective as somebody who was in television news. I have a nice little group of people who come on to talk about stuff. Actually, Christy Lee was just on. We talked about your story in just kind of like a round table that we did on people like yourself. We just showed some of the videos, and we talked about some of the stuff you and I talked about today. But yeah, I hope you'll come back on when there's other stuff, and I really do. I wish you all the best.
All right. Thank you, Allison, and all the best to you too and your viewers. Thanks for watching, everybody.
All right. Thanks, guys.